Imagine a world where good and evil are locked in cosmic battle, where a single supreme God rules the universe, where humans have free will to choose between right and wrong, where there's a heaven for the righteous and punishment for the wicked, where history moves toward a final judgment and the ultimate triumph of good over evil. Sound familiar? It should. These ideas form the backbone of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. But here's what most people don't know. These concepts didn't originate with Abraham, Moses, or Muhammad. They came from a single visionary prophet who lived somewhere between 1500 and 600 BCE in ancient Persia. His name was Zarathustra, or as the Greeks called him, Zoroaster. This is the story of history's most influential forgotten prophet, a man who spoke to God in visions of fire. A man whose ideas would reshape Judaism during the Babylonian exile, influence early Christianity, inspire Islamic mysticism, and even captivate philosophers from Plato to Nietzsche. A man whose followers today number only around 100,000, yet whose theological innovations continue to shape the beliefs of 4 billion people. Today we're diving into the life, teachings, and extraordinary legacy of Zarathustra, the prophet who arguably invented the concept of religious choice, the idea of a cosmic struggle between good and evil, and possibly even the concept of monotheism itself. This is a story that will challenge everything you thought you knew about the origins of Western religion. Here's our first problem. We have almost no reliable biographical information about Zarathustra. Dating his life has been one of the great puzzles of religious history. Traditional Zoroastrian sources place him 258 years before Alexander the Great's conquest of Persia in 330 BCE, which would date him to around 588 BCE. Greek sources suggested he lived 6,000 years before Plato. Medieval Islamic scholars placed him in various eras. Some modern scholars argue for dates as early as 1500 BCE, while others suggest 1000 BCE or even later. The current scholarly consensus tends toward somewhere between 1500 and 1000 BCE, making him roughly contemporary with or earlier than Moses, and definitely earlier than Buddha, Confucius, or any of the Hebrew prophets whose writings we possess. Why the confusion? Because Zarathustra's life story has been buried under layers of legend, myth, and theological elaboration. By the time his biography was written down in the Pahlavi texts of the Sasanian era, 3rd–7th centuries CE, he'd been dead for over 1,000 years, and his story had transformed into something between history and mythology. But here's what we can piece together from the earliest sources. The Gathas, 17 hymns believed to be composed by Zarathustra himself and preserved in the Avesta, the sacred texts of Zoroastrianism. Zarathustra was born into the Spitama clan, probably somewhere in northeastern Iran, or perhaps in what's now Afghanistan or Central Asia. His father's name was Purushaspa, and his mother was Dugdova. The later traditions claim miraculous signs surrounded his birth. He laughed instead of crying, evil spirits fled, and the cosmic forces of good celebrated. He was trained as a priest in the traditional polytheistic religion of the ancient Iranians, which closely resembled the Vedic religion of India. They shared a common Indo-Iranian heritage. Both traditions worshipped multiple gods, Daivas in Iranian, Devas in Sanskrit, performed elaborate rituals, and used a sacred drink, Hauma in Iranian, Soma in Sanskrit, in their ceremonies. Zarathustra married and had children. He lived an ordinary priestly life, performing rituals, maintaining sacred fires, and participating in the complex religious system of his time. And then, at age 30, everything changed. According to the Gathas and later traditions, Zarathustra was participating in a spring festival, perhaps performing purification rituals by a river, when he had a vision that would alter the course of human religious thought. He saw a luminous being of enormous size, 9 times the height of a man, appear before him. This was Vohumana, good mind, or good purpose, one of the divine emanations of God. Vohumana led Zarathustra into the presence of Ahura Mazda, the wise Lord. In this visionary audience, Ahura Mazda revealed fundamental truths about the nature of reality. And what Zarathustra learned was revolutionary, even heretical to his contemporaries. First, Ahura Mazda declared that he alone was the supreme God, the creator of all that is good. The many gods that Zarathustra and his people had been worshipping, they were either aspects of Ahura Mazda himself, or more problematically, they were demons, evil spirits that had deceived humanity. This was a theological earthquake. Imagine being a priest in a polytheistic tradition, then suddenly declaring that all the gods your people worship are actually demons. The Devas that his people revered were, in Zarathustra's new understanding, servants of evil. Second, Ahura Mazda revealed that the universe was the battleground of a cosmic struggle between truth, Asha, and the lie, Druj. Between the forces of good led by Ahura Mazda and the forces of evil led by Angra Mainyu, later called Ahriman, the destructive spirit. Third, and perhaps most revolutionary, humans were not mere pawns in this cosmic drama. Each person had free will to choose between good and evil, between truth and the lie. Your choices mattered. Your actions had cosmic significance. Fourth, there would be a final reckoning. History was not cyclical but linear, moving toward a decisive endpoint when good would triumph over evil, the dead would be resurrected, and the world would be purified by molten metal, a kind of universal judgment that would separate the righteous from the wicked. These ideas, monotheism, or something very close to it, cosmic dualism between good and evil, free will, personal moral responsibility, resurrection, final judgment, heaven and hell, sound familiar because they became central to later Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. But in Zarathustra's time, they were radical innovations. Here's an unusual detail. Zarathustra had not one vision, but several. Over the next 7 years, he experienced a series of visions in which he encountered different aspects of the divine. The Ameshaspentas, or holy immortals who were either angels or divine attributes or both. These included Vohumana, good mind, Asha Vahishta, best truth, Kshatra Vairya, desirable dominion, Spenta Armaiti, holy devotion, Harvatat, wholeness, and Amaritat, immortality. But if you think having cosmic visions would make spreading your message easy, Zarathustra's early career proves otherwise. For 10 years after his initial vision, Zarathustra preached his revolutionary message and got exactly one convert, his cousin, Maidyoy Manha. Think about that. 10 years of prophetic ministry, and he convinced exactly one person. Why the resistance? Zarathustra's message threatened everything his society held sacred. He was calling their gods demons. He was undermining the entire priestly establishment and their rituals. He was introducing uncomfortable concepts like personal moral responsibility and cosmic judgment, and perhaps most problematically, he was attacking the practice of animal sacrifice, which was central to the old religion. The Gathas preserve Zarathustra's own words of frustration and isolation. To what land shall I flee? Where shall I go to flee? They exclude me from family and clan. The community with which I have associated has not satisfied me, nor have the rulers of the land. The religious establishment particularly opposed him. The existing priests, called Kavis and Karapans, saw him as a threat to their power and livelihood. According to later tradition, they actively persecuted him, attempting to kill him on several occasions. Zarathustra wandered from place to place, preaching his message of one supreme God, moral choice, and cosmic justice. He was rejected, scorned, and endangered. Then, in what must have seemed like either divine providence or incredible luck, Zarathustra found his way to the court of King Vishtaspa, ruler of Bactria, in modern-day northern Afghanistan or southern Uzbekistan. Initially, Vishtaspa was skeptical. The court priests opposed Zarathustra, accusing him of sorcery. According to legend, they even imprisoned him. But Zarathustra performed what the texts call miracles, the most famous being the healing of Vishtaspa's favorite horse, which had mysteriously had its legs drawn up into its body. Zarathustra healed one leg at a time, each healing contingent on a condition. Vishtaspa accepting the faith, the crown prince accepting it, the queen accepting it, and so on. Whether through miracles, persuasive theology, or political calculation, Vishtaspa converted. And with the king's conversion came the conversion of his court, his army, and eventually much of his kingdom. Zarathustra had found his Constantine, his Clovis, his Ashoka, a powerful ruler who would make his faith the religion of a nation. Here's an unusual fact. Zarathustra married Vishtaspa's daughter, Vovi, cementing the alliance between prophet and king. He also married 2 other women and had 6 children total. Unlike later religious figures who remained celibate, Zarathustra enthusiastically embraced family life, which fit his theology. The world was not evil, and participation in it was not sinful, but sacred. With royal backing, Zarathustra spent his remaining years establishing his religion, composing hymns, training priests, and spreading his message. The old religion didn't disappear overnight, but Zoroastrianism became the dominant faith of the emerging Persian civilization. Let's examine Zarathustra's theological innovations more carefully, because their influence on later religions cannot be overstated. Zarathustra proclaimed Ahura Mazda as the supreme God, creator of all good things. But here's where it gets complicated. He also taught that Angra Mainyu, the destructive spirit, was a nearly equal opposite force of evil. Is this monotheism? Scholars debate. Some argue Zarathustra was a true monotheist who saw evil as merely the absence of good, with Angra Mainyu more of a corrupted aspect of creation than an independent deity. Others argue it's dualism, 2 cosmic forces in eternal opposition. Later, Zoroastrianism definitely leaned toward dualism, teaching that Ahura Mazda and Angra Mainyu were twin spirits who chose opposite paths at the beginning of creation. But the earliest Gathas seem more ambiguous, suggesting that Angra Mainyu's power is real, but ultimately subordinate to Ahura Mazda's. Regardless of the technical classification, what's clear is that Zarathustra reduced a crowded pantheon to essentially one supreme good God, which was revolutionary for his time. The real innovation wasn't cosmic dualism, but ethical dualism. The universe, according to Zarathustra, operated according to a fundamental moral principle: Asha, truth, order, righteousness, versus Druj, the lie, chaos, evil. Everything could be categorized as aligned with Asha or Druj. Good thoughts, good words, and good deeds supported Asha. Evil thoughts, evil words, and evil deeds supported Druj. This created a moral framework where every action had cosmic significance. In Zarathustra's theology, humans weren't puppets of fate or the gods. Each person possessed urvan, the faculty of choice, and could freely choose between good and evil. This choice determined not just your earthly life, but your eternal destiny. This was radical. In most ancient religions, your fate was determined by the gods, by fate itself, or by your birth. Zarathustra said, no, you choose. You're responsible. You make yourself worthy or unworthy. Zarathustra introduced a linear view of history with a beginning, middle, and end. History had 3 ages: creation, the present age of mixture, where good and evil coexist, and the final age of restoration, when evil would be defeated. At the end of history, there would be a final judgment called the Frashokareti, the making wonderful, or renovation. The dead would be resurrected. Each person would pass through a river of molten metal, which would feel like warm milk to the righteous but would torture the wicked, and evil would be finally destroyed. The universe wouldn't cycle endlessly. It was moving toward an ultimate destination, the complete victory of good over evil. Each person would face individual judgment after death. The soul would come to the Chinvat bridge, the bridge of judgment. Those whose good deeds outweighed their bad would cross easily into paradise. Those whose evil deeds outweighed their good would fall from the bridge into hell. But here's what's interesting. Zarathustra's hell wasn't necessarily eternal. Some texts suggest that after the final judgment, even the wicked would be purified and redeemed. Evil would be destroyed, but souls might ultimately be saved. Unlike later religions that would view the material world as fallen or evil, Zarathustra taught that creation was fundamentally good. Fire, water, earth, and air were sacred. Animals were sacred, which is why animal sacrifice was wrong. The human body was sacred. Marriage and reproduction were sacred duties. This positive view of the material world would later distinguish Zoroastrianism from some forms of Christianity and Gnosticism that viewed matter as evil. Here's where things get particularly interesting for our understanding of Zarathustra's worldview. Ancient Zoroastrianism had profound astronomical dimensions. The Zoroastrians became master astronomers, and this wasn't accidental, it was theological. Ahura Mazda was associated with light, particularly the sun and stars, which were seen as his eyes watching over creation. The movement of celestial bodies reflected divine order. Asha manifested in the heavens. Observing the stars was observing the handiwork and patterns of God himself. The Zoroastrian calendar was precisely calibrated to astronomical observations, with the new year, Nowruz, falling on the spring equinox, a moment of perfect balance between light and darkness, symbolizing the cosmic balance between good and evil. For those interested in how ancient religious traditions developed sophisticated astronomical knowledge and integrated it into their theology, books like E.C. Krupp's Echoes of the Ancient Skies offer fascinating insights into how celestial observation shaped religious practice across ancient civilizations, including the precise timekeeping and cosmic symbolism of Zoroastrian fire temples. The sacred fires kept burning in Zoroastrian temples weren't just symbols, they were earthly reflections of the celestial fires, the stars themselves. Tending these fires and maintaining their purity was a way of participating in the cosmic order. Zarathustra's death is shrouded in legend, but the most common tradition holds that he died at age 77, murdered while praying at a fire temple. According to the story, Turanian nomads, traditional enemies of the Iranians, invaded Bactria. Zarathustra was at the fire altar performing rituals when a Turanian warrior named Bradrock entered the temple and killed him with a sword. Different versions offer different details. Some say Zarathustra was 77 years old. Others say he was 47 years after his conversion, making him also 77. The number itself might be symbolic rather than literal. Here's an unusual detail. Some traditions claim that as Zarathustra died, fire descended from heaven and consumed his body, leaving no corpse behind. Other versions say he was cremated according to the custom of the time, though later Zoroastrianism would forbid both cremation and burial, instead exposing bodies in towers of silence to be consumed by vultures, a practice meant to avoid polluting the sacred elements of fire, earth, and water with death. The historical reality is we don't know how he died. He might have died peacefully in old age. He might have been killed by religious opponents. He might have died in battle defending Vishtaspa's kingdom. The murdered at prayer narrative fits the pattern of martyred prophets, but that doesn't make it historical. What we do know is that his death didn't end his movement. By the time of his death, Zoroastrianism had taken root in Bactria and was spreading throughout the Iranian plateau. Within a few centuries, it would become the state religion of the greatest empires of the ancient world. About 2 centuries after Zarathustra's death, Cyrus the Great founded the Achaemenid Persian Empire, the largest empire the world had yet seen, stretching from India to Egypt, from Central Asia to the Aegean Sea. And Cyrus was a Zoroastrian. Well, sort of. The religious situation was complicated. Cyrus clearly venerated Ahura Mazda, whom he called the greatest of gods, but he also seems to have practiced religious tolerance uncommon in the ancient world, When he conquered Babylon in 539 BCE, he famously allowed the Jewish exiles to return to Jerusalem and rebuild their temple, even financing the project from the royal treasury. This is where the influence becomes undeniable. The Jews who returned from Babylonian exile returned with new theological concepts that hadn't existed in pre-exilic Judaism. A cosmic adversary called Satan, angels and demons, heaven and hell, resurrection of the dead, and apocalyptic visions of a final judgment. Where did these ideas come from? Many scholars argue they came from exposure to Zoroastrianism during the exile and under Persian rule. The later Achaemenid rulers, particularly Darius the Firm and his successors, were more explicitly Zoroastrian. Darius's inscriptions invoke Ahura Mazda constantly. Ahura Mazda, when he saw this earth in commotion, thereafter bestowed it upon me, made me king. The Achaemenid Empire lasted from 550 to 330 BCE, giving Zoroastrianism over 2 centuries as the religion of the world's superpower. During this time, Zoroastrian texts were compiled, fire temples were built, and the religion spread throughout the empire. Then came Alexander the Great. When Alexander conquered Persia in 330 BCE, he reportedly burned the royal palace at Persepolis and, according to Zoroastrian tradition, destroyed many religious texts. The Avesta, which Zoroastrians claim was originally written on 12,000 cowhides, was allegedly reduced to fragments. The Hellenistic period saw Zoroastrianism retreat, but it resurged under the Parthian Empire, 247 BCE, 224 CE, and especially under the Sasanian Empire, 224 to 651 CE. The Sasanian rulers made Zoroastrianism the official state religion. They compiled what remained of the Avesta, standardized theology, built magnificent fire temples, and persecuted other religions, including Christians, Jews, and Buddhists. Ironically, the religion of free choice became, in some periods, quite intolerant of other choices. During the Sasanian era, Zoroastrianism reached its institutional peak. The high priest, Mobadi Mobadan, priest of priests, wielded enormous political power. Fire temples dotted the empire. Zoroastrian law governed daily life. But this golden age would end catastrophically. In the 7th century CE, Arab Muslim armies erupted from the Arabian Peninsula, conquering the Sasanian Empire in a remarkably short time. By 651 CE, the last Sasanian king was dead, and Persia was under Islamic rule. Initially, Zoroastrians, like Jews and Christians, were given dhimmi status as people of the book, protected but second-class citizens who paid special taxes. But over the following centuries, conversion to Islam, whether voluntary or coerced, dramatically reduced Zoroastrian numbers. Some Zoroastrians resisted, some converted, some fled. Here's one of history's most poignant religious migrations. In the 10th century CE, a group of Zoroastrians sailed from Persia to Gujarat in western India, seeking religious freedom. According to legend, the local Hindu king was initially reluctant to admit them. He sent them a bowl of milk filled to the brim, symbolizing that his land was already full. The Zoroastrian leader dissolved some sugar in the milk and returned the bowl, symbolizing that they would sweeten the land without displacing anyone. The king granted them refuge on several conditions. They would explain their religion, adopt local dress, adopt the local language, Gujarati, hold wedding ceremonies at night, and surrender their weapons. The Zoroastrians agreed. These refugees became the Parsis, meaning Persians, and for 1,000 years they maintained their faith in India. The Parsi community produced remarkable contributions to Indian society, particularly in business and industry. Families like the Tatas became industrial giants while maintaining their Zoroastrian identity. Meanwhile, in Iran, Zoroastrians became an increasingly marginalized minority. They faced periodic persecution, forced conversions, and legal discrimination. Yet somehow, they survived. Today, Zoroastrians number perhaps 100,000, 200,000 worldwide, roughly 60,000 Parsis in India, 25,000 Iranian Zoroastrians, and the rest scattered globally, particularly in North America and Europe. For a religion that once commanded the allegiance of the world's greatest empires, it's a stunning reversal of fortune. Yet here's the unusual paradox. Zoroastrianism may be small in numbers, but it remains immense in influence. Let me make a controversial claim. Zarathustra may be the most influential religious figure you've never heard of. Consider what Judaism looked like before and after the Babylonian exile. Pre-exilic Judaism had no clear conception of Satan as God's cosmic adversary, no developed angelology, no explicit teaching on resurrection or final judgment, no heaven and hell in the later sense. Post-exilic Judaism, the Judaism that emerged under Persian rule, suddenly has all these concepts. The Book of Daniel, written under Persian influence, is full of apocalyptic visions that look remarkably Zoroastrian. The Dead Sea Scrolls speak of a cosmic war between the sons of light and the sons of darkness, language straight from Zoroastrian dualism. Christianity inherited these ideas from Second Temple Judaism, the cosmic battle between God and Satan, angels and demons, heaven and hell, the resurrection of the dead, the final judgment, the apocalyptic end of the world. These are all concepts that Christianity took from Judaism, which likely borrowed them from Zoroastrianism. Islam, too, shows Zoroastrian influence, particularly in its angelology, its concept of the straight path, Sirat, that parallels the Zoroastrian Chinvat bridge, and its teaching on individual judgment. Even the Magi who visited Jesus in Matthew's Gospel were likely Zoroastrian priests. The word magi is the plural of magus, which comes from the Old Persian magus, meaning a Zoroastrian priest. These wise men from the east who followed a star were probably Zoroastrian astrologers whose study of the heavens, a sacred duty in their religion, led them to Bethlehem. The influence extended beyond religion into philosophy. Plato likely encountered Zoroastrian ideas, and some scholars argue his dualism between the world of forms and the material world shows Zoroastrian influence. Plutarch explicitly discussed Zoroaster in his writings on dualism. In the 19th century, Nietzsche chose Zarathustra as the protagonist of his philosophical masterpiece, Thus Spoke Zarathustra, seeing in the ancient prophet a figure who had introduced moral categories into human thinking, and who therefore must be the one to overcome them. The influence even extends to popular culture. The concept of a cosmic battle between good and evil, the idea that humans must choose a side, the expectation of a final battle and judgment. These narrative frameworks that underlie everything from Star Wars to The Lord of the Rings to Marvel Comics owe their existence, at least partly, to a Persian prophet from 3,000 years ago. Here's perhaps the most unusual influence. Some scholars argue that monotheism itself, the idea that there's only one God worthy of worship, may have been invented by Zarathustra and only later adopted by the Israelites. While this remains controversial, the timeline is suggestive. If the early dating of Zarathustra around 1500–1000 BCE is correct, he predates Moses, if Moses existed as a historical figure, or at least the emergence of Israelite monotheism in its clear form. For understanding how Zarathustra's cosmic vision was literally reflected in the stars, how the careful observation of celestial order reinforced theological concepts of universal order, books like Anthony Avini's Sky Watchers are excellent resources. They explore how ancient astronomers, including the Zoroastrian priesthood, developed precise observational techniques that served both practical and theological purposes, showing how the study of the heavens and the study of the divine were inseparable in ancient thought. So what do we make of Zarathustra, this shadowy figure from deep antiquity, whose influence shaped the religious landscape of half the world? First, we must acknowledge how little we actually know about the historical person. Was he a monotheist or a dualist? Did he live in 1500 BCE or 600 BCE? Was he murdered, or did he die peacefully? Did he really have cosmic visions, or were these later theological elaborations? The honest answer is we don't know. The man is lost in time, buried under layers of legend. But here's what we can say. Someone at some point introduced revolutionary religious ideas that changed the course of human thought. Whether it was a single individual named Zarathustra or a tradition that crystallized around that name, the impact is undeniable. Before Zarathustra, or at least before Zoroastrianism, religion was primarily about appeasing gods through rituals and sacrifices. The gods were capricious, humans were powerless, fate was inescapable. Morality was defined by social custom rather than cosmic principle. After Zarathustra, religion became about moral choice. The universe had a moral structure. Right and wrong weren't arbitrary. They were fundamental features of reality itself. Humans weren't powerless, they were moral agents whose choices mattered cosmically. History wasn't cyclical, it was moving toward a definitive resolution. Death wasn't the end. Judgment and resurrection awaited. These ideas feel natural to us now because we've inherited them through Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. But they had to come from somewhere. They had to be thought for the first time. Someone had to make that conceptual leap. Zarathustra, or the tradition bearing his name, made that leap. Perhaps his greatest gift was the concept of choice itself. In Zarathustra's theology, you weren't born into virtue or vice. You weren't predetermined to salvation or damnation. You chose. Every day, in every action, you chose between truth and the lie, between Asha and Druj. That idea, that you are responsible for your moral life, that your choices have cosmic significance, that you will be judged for those choices, is so fundamental to how we think about ethics and religion that we can barely imagine thinking any other way. But someone had to think it first. Zarathustra also gave us hope. If the cosmic battle between good and evil is real, if it matters which side you choose, that means evil isn't all-powerful. It means good can triumph. It means history is going somewhere, that suffering and injustice aren't the final word. The Frashokareti, the final renovation when evil is defeated and creation is restored to its intended perfection, is an idea of staggering optimism. It says that broken things can be mended, that wrong can be made right, that the world can be healed. That hope has sustained billions of people through countless dark nights. Today, as the Zoroastrian community dwindles, there's poignant irony in Zarathustra's legacy. The faith he founded is dying, while the ideas he pioneered have conquered the world through other religions. But perhaps that's fitting. Zarathustra didn't claim to have a monopoly on truth. He claimed to have received a revelation of the truth, that there is one good God, that humans must choose between good and evil, that our choices matter. If those ideas have spread throughout humanity in various forms, perhaps Zarathustra, or Ahura Mazda speaking through him, has succeeded beyond any narrow sectarian victory. The next time you think about heaven and hell, angels and demons, free will and moral responsibility, the final judgment and the resurrection of the dead, remember, these ideas weren't always obvious. They came from somewhere. They came from a Persian prophet standing before a sacred fire, who looked into the cosmos and saw not chaos but order, not meaninglessness but purpose, not determinism but choice. They came from Zarathustra, the prophet who taught humanity that we are not victims of fate but moral agents with the power and responsibility to choose between good and evil. And in making that choice, we participate in nothing less than the cosmic struggle for the soul of creation itself. Thank you for watching. If you found this deep dive into Zarathustra fascinating, please like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. Let me know in the comments which ancient or medieval figure you'd like me to cover next. And if you're interested in the nearly forgotten religions that shaped our world, you might enjoy our videos on Manichaeism, Mithraism, and the Gathas. Until next time, may you choose wisely between truth and the lie.